Whatever you may think of Ari Aster as a filmmaker, you can always say one thing: his movies are definitely an experience. Eddington, the latest movie from the acclaimed horror director Ari Aster, is a very different film from his previous works. One important thing to remember about Ari Aster as a director is that his primary motivation is not to entertain. His motivation is to provoke a response. The film Eddington is a prime example of that. This film is a provocation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a standoff between a small town sheriff and mayor sparks a powder keg as neighbor is pitted against neighbor in Eddington, New Mexico. The opening scene of the film features a disheveled vagrant wandering the streets of Eddington like a deranged prophet, shouting about some sort of impending reckoning. Clearly, something bad is coming to the town of Eddington, and it's not just COVID. Funnily enough, I think this might be Ari Aster's most accessible movie. I certainly found it his funniest. I laughed quite a bit in this movie. It is clearly a satire. Admittedly, it's a rather mean spirited one, but I found myself laughing, cringing, and ultimately gasping at the screen. So, as the movie opens, we're introduced to the character of Joe Cross. Cross is the sheriff of Eddington, a man who's facing many personal and professional problems. His marriage is in trouble. His wife, Lou, is distancing herself from him, and he doesn't know why. His conspiracy spouting, emotionally unstable mother in law has been living with them for the past several months, without any end in sight. His town is under lockdown, and the people are growing increasingly isolated and restless. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the progressive mayor of Eddington, played by Pedro Pascal, Mayor Ted Garcia. He's been the driving force behind the COVID lockdowns, which is clearly a source of political tension. But there's also clearly something more personal going on between these two men. Tensions between the two men come to a head when Sheriff Cross impulsively decides to challenge Mayor Garcia in his re-election campaign for mayor, a decision that brings all of the simmering tension in Eddington to a boiling point. Just as background, the town of Eddington itself is positioned directly on the border between New Mexico and Pueblo tribal land. So the town is physically divided as well as politically. Even though Mayor Garcia presents himself as a progressive, he is also working with the governor to bring some sort of shadowy AI data center to town, which is projected to be constructed on the outskirts of Eddington. This is another source of division within the community, where there are actually environmental activists who are opposed to it, therefore end up aligning with Sheriff Cross, who is sort of coded as more of a right-leaning figure. Political boundaries are sort of amorphous. There are lots of shades of gray, and no one's hands are entirely clean. On a macro level, this film is about the fragility of the social bond and how easily that bond can be ruptured by distrust and paranoia. The film also clearly explores the role that social media has played in exacerbating the tensions and division between us. On a micro level, this is about a man whose personal and professional lives are crumbling around him piece by piece. Phoenix is an actor who gives such consistently good performances that it's easy to take him for granted. But I feel like he turns in some really stellar work here. He portrays Sheriff Cross as a man who is spiritually, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. He can feel any control over his life gradually slipping away from him. And as we all know, there is nothing more dangerous than a person who feels they have lost all control over their lives and has nothing left to lose. I am going to move now into spoilers. So if you're interested in seeing this movie at all, I recommend that you stop and fast forward for a few minutes. The first two-thirds of the film are definitely a slow build-up with tension mounting, and you're feeling more and more discomfort and foreboding and wondering what's going to happen. And then the last half hour, 45 minutes of the film, I would say, are the catharsis. The sheriff's wife leaves him. She leaves him to join a sort of QAnon-esque cult led by Austin Butler. With his wife gone and his mayoral campaign in absolute shambles, the sheriff gets a noise complaint about a fundraiser happening at the mayor's house. He goes to address it, and there is one final confrontation between the sheriff and the mayor. The confrontation culminates with the mayor slapping the sheriff across the face. This public humiliation, in the wake of the private devastation he suffered, ends up pushing the sheriff over the edge, and he goes on a shooting spree, which eventually leaves both the mayor and his teenage son dead. He then proceeds to attempt to cover his tracks by framing the only African American member of his department. Now, not surprisingly, this plan is going quite well until, wait for it, a group of heavily armed masked men fly into town and start shooting people. It is heavily implied that they have been going to other communities and engaging in the same sorts of activity. So it seems like they are there to escalate the situation into full-on violence. This is a big swing. I could fully understand how some people might think the movie's going off the rails at this point. There's a sort of fatalism that infuses all of Aster's work, and the sense that we're all just insects futilely grasping at meaning as we march towards the same inevitable doom. I was reminded of a film called Bacurau. It's very different in terms of its overall plot and setting, etc., but I actually think it has some of the same theme, where you sort of get a peek behind the curtain and you see a hint of shadowy forces at work that seem to be orchestrating events on a global scale. When the movie ends, things have apparently calmed down. The new data center has been built, and a measure of calm seems to have been restored. However, the very last shot of the film is of someone practicing target shooting on the outskirts of the town. The film ends as it begins, with the threat of impending violence. This is an ambitious, funny, mean-spirited, weird movie, and I am sure it will be deeply polarizing. It's not a movie I would necessarily recommend to very many people either, but I think a certain segment of the audience will really appreciate it, and I certainly did. So to Ari Aster, I would say, shine on, you crazy diamond.